Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to hear it. We have recently covered the Ayn Rand Institute's article on schisms, and now we wanted to take a closer look at their schism with Carl Barney, starting with his specific charges against ARI from 2020. So, who is Carl Barney and why does it matter? Barney is a multimillionaire who basically helped fund the Ayn Rand Institute from the beginning in the 80s. He and John Ellison were the main funders for years. He was removed by the board in March of 2019, and it wasn't until October of 2020 that he started going public with his charges against the Ayn Rand Institute. And since we're going to give this an objective analysis, part of that can be me confessing that, at the time, I immediately identified with Barney when the essays came out. I guess partially because of the huge chip on my shoulder about being excommunicated by objectivist groups. And here you've got a guy, Barney, he gave ARI $40 million over the years. And at the end, they just tried to ignore him and blow him off the way they did with other dissenters. And, for all his money, he came to realize that his best chance for justice, I think, was to be open with the public about his version of events and state why he thinks he was wrong, ultimately in hopes, that he could rally others around him.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what Barney has to say about ARI. In fact, I've read the articles, but it's been a while, so it'll be interesting to go through them again. I'm not as sympathetic to Barney because I know his history, and so I think that he's a little loose with objectivity. I'm going to try to be very, very analytical and critical.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And there are things that, I agree he may not be, totally straightforward about what, he's trying to basically gain his influence in the organization that he believes he's funded. But I've got things to say, look, he's never funded me, and I seriously doubt he will fund us after this show. But, why are we talking about this? It's in part because there are very few people objectively interested in the veracity of the charges. I mean, there's Barney's side who support him, and then there's the ARI side and a general public that was told by ARI that the charges are arbitrary and unobjective, and too many seem just uncurious to even explore further. I mean, in some ways, I feel worse for those who would prefer to be friends with both the ARI and TOS camps, because they're the ones being squeezed in the middle with, ARI saying that Biddle has acted immorally. And, a breach of morality is the thing that Rand basically said not to forgive. So
right. There's a lot of objectivists who are very sympathetic to both Biddle and ARI. So it is important, I think, for people to get their heads around this issue and figure out what is really going on and who's telling the truth, what sounds reasonable, what is clearly wrong or contradictory. And it's interesting to me that there has been a reply to Biddle when Craig Biddle came out with his charges, but no one has really seriously taken up Carl Barney's charges. So I hope that this can be a start to that effort, and maybe more people will want to take an interest in examining these issues more closely.
Absolutely. And I should say there are two sets of issues. We're going to break them actually into separate episodes, but one, did ARI live up to their agreements with Carl Barney? And separately, in his later charges, is ARI failing? I mean, the charges are not arbitrary. They matter. Either ARI is running ethically and efficiently, or it's not.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're starting with October 6th of 2020. And he comes out and says that it's titled "The Truth About Craig Biddle versus Smears" by some at ARI. And he starts, praising Biddle, the man that he, by this point, has handpicked to run his Prometheus Foundation. And he then says, Craig's work is exemplary. Yet some people at ARI, most notably Ankar and Debbie Gate, sometimes supported by Yaron Brook, deny this and defame him. They claim that Craig doesn't understand objectivism, he has in quotes, and have even said that he is, quote, immoral. Against so much positive evidence, what could explain this? So this is his rationale for starting to open up all this time later. And he starts off, you could say these are somewhat petty, but I think he's giving some background. He says that Ankar has been going after Craig since 2006. He goes back and says that it started when Craig wanted a rewrite of Debbie Gate's piece that Ankar had already edited, her husband. And it's almost petty enough it gives it the ring of authenticity. But, this is one example. They had another run-in when Craig complained to Yaron about a piece that Ankar wrote and whether it properly represented objectivism. I mean, you can read the article, we'll have a link, but it's clear that, Craig and Ankar were becoming adversarial by this point, which is relevant for later. Go ahead.
Sure. So this initial charge essentially boils down to Ankar Gate, not being pleased with the editorial decisions of Craig Biddle. And so it seems like that's not really in question. Apparently there's been no response to this, so I'm assuming there's evidence for this. There's got to be lots of emails going back and forth, so it's probably something that can be easily proved if needed. But my question is, was Ankar really trying to impose some sort of editorial power over Craig's magazine? We don't know the answer to this because we don't have Ankar's story. So one of my issues is that we don't hear from the other side. We don't hear Ankar's story. And that's a problem because there's a lot of people wondering, well, what is his view? And how do you get that information? Do you have to email him privately to get that information? Is he going to answer you in an email? It's these seems like he's being accused of starting this schism, and so that's kind of a problem, I think, if he's not going to reply.
Well, the whole point of their schism's long essay was to justify to themselves not replying to any of this.
Yeah.
Now, what then happens, a big year in objectivism was 2010, because or maybe 2009 is when it started, but basically Peikoff had gotten together to write The Logical Leap with David Harriman. And then someone on the board, John McCaskey, and you know more about this story from your background, but that he had written a scathing review of the book. And at that point, this is where Peikoff basically said, it's McCaskey or me. And people started lining up. And then, a few people.
So McCaskey didn't write the review first. He was criticizing some elements of the book, and mostly in private and in objectivist groups, and I think they had a conference, private conference. So he was voicing his problems with the book and emailing David Harriman. And then when Peikoff heard about this, then that's when he had a problem, because Peikoff said he didn't know to what extent McCaskey was spreading his criticism around.
Okay.
The Amazon review came afterward.
Well, ultimately, people started taking sides. Most people took Peikoff's side, and a few notable exceptions. Our guest from last week, Rob Trzynski, wrote a a big piece, taking the side of McCaskey, and just, or generally just not liking Peikoff making it an either or proposition, that it had to be one of them to leave. And then Craig Biddle was another one who took McCaskey's side, or at least had enough critiques of Harriman or Peikoff that he kind of was on the outs with them too. And so Barney says in 2010, Onkar was further angered by Biddle's comment on the schism with McCaskey, repeatedly calling it garbage to OAC students, and which Barney himself says he wasn't thrilled about at the time. This is part of because Barney's very close with Peikoff, and from what I understand, still is today. But so at this point,
yeah, well, that's an interesting point. How did that relationship go down? Like, so Peikoff's friends with Barney, yet this whole time this problem's been brewing between Barney and ARI. Did Barney talk to Peikoff about that, or why didn't Peikoff try to help out, or did he try to help out? So there's all this behind the scenes stuff that we don't really know, and it's kind of curious why this got to a boiling point when they were all friends, and why couldn't they handle this, especially when Barney's friends with Peikoff and Peikoff's friends with Huron. They're all, there's this circle of friends. Seems like they should have been able to handle this.
Peikoff is retiring, and now this, you can call this hearsay. I heard 30 years ago when everything was going down with George Reisman and Edith Packer versus the Biswanger Schwartz faction, and it was ultimately Reisman and Packer who got excommunicated. But they, all sides went to Peikoff, and Peikoff was, I think he had some health issues at the time. And what I heard was that he said he didn't want to be bothered by it. And that seems consistent with, him saying that he didn't want Huron asking him about the election and talking about, his views or things like that. So I can believe that that's part of what happened, that even as Barney and Huron, were feuding a few years ago, at this point, Peikoff's pretty much retired and saying the same thing. You all work it out amongst yourselves. Don't involve me. Now that's speculation on my part, but it at least is plausible.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It's an interesting question to me is, why is Peikoff, just out of the picture, and when it comes to these schisms, he's just gone. And he's friends with both people. He's friends with both sides, and it doesn't seem like there's a way to resolve the situation. And you'd think that these titans of objectivity and reason, they would be able to figure this out, and come to some amicable agreement.
Yeah, or at least use his authority to say, hey, you guys work it out. We're all on the same team here. Yeah. Patch up your differences.
Especially when, if it's true that Peikoff offered to, originally he liked Craig Biddle and offered to write an introduction to his book. If that's true, why wouldn't he go to bat for Craig Biddle?
Yeah. Well, what happened? By 2010, Biddle and, Trzynski are on the outs. And at this point, Barney is sort of, I think, on the outs with Biddle as well. And they're not talking as much, and so Barney claims that after this, that, this caused some OAC students to leave the program, that basically every schism causes people to leave. But with what was going on with Craig and Onkar specifically, he claims that, Onkar said Craig doesn't understand objectivism and called him, quote, immoral, and got ARI to stop working with Craig or promoting his work. Yeah. So, that seems par for the course, when they basically, whether they say it openly in Kelly's case not to work with them, or it's more of a whisper campaign of, he's immoral.
Yeah. So the charge here is that Ankar was saying things to the OAC students that were negative about Biddle, and so this
Or
charge
even
is
more
based.
generally.
Yeah, and so, and then Barney says that Ankar didn't give any evidence or any argument for why his allegations were true. And I actually wrote something on this at the time because I thought when the transcript was released, I thought Craig did himself a disservice, because in that transcript, Ankar actually details like 3 points about Craig's article. And so he did kind of delve into some of the details. So it wasn't technically true that Ankar didn't give any evidence for his claim. So I think there's a problem on both sides of this. I think Ankar gave his criticism of Biddle in an OAC class. I think he should have made it public if he really felt that way about Biddle. And then Biddle, I think, made some misstatements, and I think Barney made some misstatements and didn't quite get things accurate. So, and another thing about
when you're looking to excommunicate someone, you blow all those up.
Yeah, you blow up what?
The any kind of mistake or misstatement they've made is your rationale.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do, right? When you're going back and forth and trying to reason things out, you got to point out the contradictions.
Yeah. And assuming your goal wasn't just to excommunicate all along.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the PR disaster, Barney asks who was responsible for the PR disaster in the wake of the McCaskey-Peikoff split, which is kind of a minor charge. I mean, I don't know how much Peikoff was responsible for, if you want to really start assigning percentages. But
well, I think we covered this in a previous episode, right? Where ARI seems to agree now that they shouldn't have released the email, and that's kind of what got the ball rolling in a sense, and it led to all these other things that happened, including Craig's statement. So,
right, but Peikoff had been demanding his resignation, and that was the only way I guess they could get him to resign from. It was like a trade.
Yeah, well, I happen to think that ARI dropped the ball. Peikoff was demanding that they kick out McCaskey, and ARI should have made some sort of choice. They should have said, no, we're not going to do it, or okay, let's kick him out. Maybe they took a vote. I don't know how it went down. Maybe they couldn't agree, but something happened and it got stalled at the board level, and they didn't do anything. So
I mean, Barney
think
claims that
the ball.
McCaskey released the private emails to hurt Peikoff. He also claimed that Ankar called Peikoff immoral for his handling of McCaskey. This one's very murky. There's probably much more context involved.
Yeah, this is one of the aspects of Barney that I don't really care for. Is he's not all of his charges are aimed at slights against him. Sometimes he'll just spread some gossip, I think. And
it's not gossip. He's trying to say, oh, well, if saying Peikoff is immoral is enough to get you kicked out, what about the time Ankar said it? It is a little bit petty, but I mean, he's just, it's an attempt for a single standard.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to take his word for things like that.
Yeah, it's
a
one of those that's
gossip
murky.
to me.
It's all right.
It's not something that we can verify really, unless we go talk to the person and then we get their side of the story, and then it's a he said, she said situation. Right. So,
well, in the next episode, we'll get to claims of what Peikoff said about Ankar. So, he claims when ARI shunned Craig, when Onkar and Yaron said that Craig didn't understand objectivism and was immoral, and that it hurt the objective standard. I mean, it hurts everyone that they kick out that still loves Ayn Rand. But, he's starting to talk about, possible damages, I think.
Yeah. I'm wondering if this is some sort of lead up to a lawsuit or something, because he's trying to make a case for actual damages. Like, how much money did the magazine lose? How many subscribers did it lose?
Yeah.
How is it really tied to what ARI was saying?
I suspect he had lawyers consulting with him on this, and it's good to put like kind of legal language that they see damages if only, because I think at this point he's still like wanting to be accepted back in there and for them to live up to their agreements and even do a new rapprochement with Craig.
Yeah, but we're going on many years now since this happened, and if he hasn't filed a lawsuit by now, when is he going to do it?
Right.
So
that's why.
I
but
think
it's in writing this, he was saying, you've done damage, so let's negotiate this out so it doesn't have to get to a lawsuit, even though it was mostly a bluff.
Well, okay. I mean, what is he asking for? I mean,
Well, he was saying, they've not lived up to their agreements and they need to. And the agreement they didn't live up to was rapprochement, mainly.
okay, so what he's asking for is not going to happen. So what does he want? If there's damages, like financial damages, monetary damages, then you ask for a sum of money.
Right. He's using it to use legal language to show that he was wrong. I mean, it's, but
yeah, it's more justice, I think,
Yeah.
because he's seeking some sort of justice. But what would that, if he's not going to receive reparations, then it's a punitive sort of justice he's seeking, right?
Well,
He's
I
trying to
think
inflict
morally he's
damage
trying
on
to rally
ARI.
people to him. He believes that if everyone could see what he sees, that they'd all be on his side.
And that would be damage to ARI because he'd be taking people from them now.
Well, I don't, he just wants to get rid of the people that got rid of him, I think. He still likes ARI. He still wanted to go to Ocon last year. But just to continue on this theme, of charges, he claims that within a year of blacklisting Craig, TOS subscriptions plummeted, his speaking engagements dried up. Now, I believe that all happened. We also know that like 2011 was kind of a high point of, Atlas Shrugged sales with the movies coming out and interest with the Tea Party. It's just tough to tell how much of, that peak was related to him getting blacklisted, or how much was due to, 2011 being a kind of high point for Ayn Rand generally. He claims that Craig was living on credit cards to keep TOS afloat. Yeah, like many entrepreneurs have had to do.
Yeah. So I don't think the objective standard has ever been profitable. It's always needed benefactors, I think, in order to get, a distribution and, publication distribution. And
well, like any of the organizations.
Even to get writers, I don't know how much they paid their writers, but they probably didn't pay them much. So they couldn't pay writers very much, and they didn't have a wide distribution or subscription base. It couldn't make a lot of money. So if anything, I don't even think it made any money. So the question of what damages did it incur, it's hard to say. Like, it was never profitable. So what damages really did it receive?
Yeah, it's just, I think he had a pattern of just showing that, when you have your lawyers write a tough letter for you, you show that there may be damages, and then you make a demand, whether in this case it was for rapprochement. So,
It's
I
like
mean, this,
Carl Barney had to write a bigger check to Craig, I guess.
so then we go back, a few years have passed, and I guess, Barney and Biddle have made whatever peace that they've made for what happened in 2010, when Barney wasn't happy with Biddle's comment about Peikoff and the McCaskey affair. But by 2016, they must have made some sort of peace, because several senior objectivists, Barney says, asked for rapprochement, and I was asked to assist. Now, I think that means that he was pushing for the whole idea and basically having his people at ARI suggest rapprochement on his behalf.
Yeah, man, I agree, because I think it's very reasonable that a lot of objectivist scholars would want a place like the Objective Standard to publish their articles at. It was a good magazine. It had high quality articles, or it does have high quality articles still. And yeah, I know that it's important for scholars to be able to publish. So even if it doesn't make any money, it's a good place to have, as a part of the movement where people can spread the ideas.
Yeah, and I think some people genuinely believe that, even within ARI, but it's not like it was just this groundswell movement that was just coming out of nowhere, and Barney just decided to back it. I mean, I think he wanted rapprochement with Biddle and the Ayn Rand Institute. Now, he claims that Yaron said that he was held back by Peikoff, claiming that Peikoff said, "If you are a friend of Biddle, you are not a friend of mine." Now, I can believe that Peikoff said that in 2010, right after Biddle defended McCaskey.
Okay, so this is again, it's gossip, and Barney even doubted that Peikoff said it. But maybe Peikoff says things to Yaron that only Yaron remembers, or maybe Yaron says things to Carl that only Carl remembers.
Well, that's fair conjecture. Now, Barney, for his part, said that it didn't sound right, and he went back and asked Leonard about it at a dinner. And he claimed that Peikoff said, "I have no concerns. You can do whatever you want with Craig. I do not want anyone to base their relationships on or avoid people on my personal disagreements with them." So I can believe Yaron was telling the truth about what Peikoff said in 2010, and also that Peikoff had mellowed on Craig by 2016, around the time of this conversation, which is in line with Peikoff's political evolution in the last decade that we discussed on a separate episode.
Yeah, I think it's clear that he has mellowed. He's friends with Barney, and so if it were true that he said you can't be friends with Biddle and me, then that certainly changed over time.
Right, and so Barney takes that information and says to Yaron, that I told him what Leonard said about Craig and asked him about rapprochement. And Yaron said, "Well, maybe I should write an article for the Objective Standard, and that would mend the fences." But he never did. But Barney's claim is that Yaron said he'd go along with rapprochement, but never did. And that's, probably the most substantive charge so far.
Yeah, and in Yaron's defense, a maybe is not exactly a commitment. So, Yaron apparently said, maybe I should write an article. It doesn't sound like he said he would, or he definitely would.
Well, that's true, but through later interventions and meetings that they have, I mean, he at least was going forward. Now, you can say that he was, I happen to think that he was starting to plan for Barney's exit around this time, and that he was kind of going along with it while he was lining up the board in his direction. Now,
yeah, perhaps Barney, it's not very clear when this all started.
Right, that's
we only
true.
Have Barney. We only have Carl Barney's side of it.
Yeah. Now, Barney says, I began reconsidering what had happened during and after the McCaskey affair and how Craig had been treated. And the more I reviewed the situation, the more I realized that Craig had been unfairly treated. Little passive voice there, but he says, I communicated my thoughts to people at ARI and to various objectivist intellectuals. Many agreed that Craig had been unjustly vilified and that it was time for rapprochement. So this is an important crux. It's basically how Barney's able to straddle between being pro Peikoff and pro Craig, because that conversation happened, he reviewed, and he changed his mind about Biddle in that time.
Yeah, I think a lot of what happened hinges on the release of that email, because it prompted Craig's reaction and then ARI's treatment of him. So this was an unfortunate chain of events, and I think it could have been avoided if ARI had handled the situation better. And I think they pretty much accept that now. They accept that the release of the email was a problem. And this kind of suggests that Barney's onto something when he says they should create a conflict resolution process, which is something Euron is dead set against.
Right.
He thinks that he's called it cult-like. I don't know why he called it cult-like, but he's against the conflict resolution process. But if they had a conflict resolution process, maybe they could have avoided this whole schism with Barney.
Yeah, there would at least be more communication than there is right now. So Barney says that at this point, he invites Euron and Craig to his home after they resolved this, the Peikoff stuff, where they spoke for 2 hours and developed an action plan to begin cooperating and collaborating. So, and again, I think at this point, Euron is livid that Barney is pushing this on him. And this is where he's got to be, he's being sat down. He doesn't care for Biddle. We know this. And he's not, he's probably not that big a fan of Barney anymore for pushing this on him.
Yeah. I think Barney blames Onkar for convincing Euron to not go through with rapprochement, because I think in Barney's eyes, Euron wanted rapprochement, or at least to go on that course in that direction, and then Onkar stepped in. And so I think Barney just is blaming Onkar for the whole thing.
Yeah, well, he's going back to what happened 15 years ago as background for why it must have happened. And it may have been Euron himself. And, it just that he and Onkar are on the same page. But to your point, Barney claims Euron never followed through on their promise to promote the objective standard and their articles. Barney says, unknown to me at the time, Onkar was so antipathetic to Craig that he persuaded Euron not to cooperate. And that's speculation on Barney's part. Maybe Euron didn't want to cooperate on his own.
Well, it could be speculation, or there could be an email chain. We don't know. We don't know what the emails were like.
That's true.
Maybe Euron was telling Carl what Onkar was saying. So who knows?
Well, here he gets into some of what happened during rapprochement. He claims that by 2017, other objectivists were also eager for rapprochement. And CEO at the time, Jim Brown, and then Tal agreed to allow a TOS display table at Ocon. I'm curious what the story with Jim Brown being CEO for a year before they bumped him up to the board.
I don't know. I don't know what that was about. He may have just been an interim sort of CEO while they were looking for a full-time one. It's private.
But again, Barney, without meaning to, is painting a picture of how he was still probably kind of goading others to say they were for rapprochement too. And maybe many of them were okay either way. They just didn't have a strong opinion about it either way. But he goes on to claim at the last minute that now new chief philosophy officer on Carr forbade the display and had tried to block Craig from attending, even though he backed off on that once Barney called him out on it.
Yeah. So I keep coming back to these questions of how does Carl Barney know all this? There must be some emails, he was told this probably in an email.
Right. People are telling this probably in confidence. It's just part of why he didn't include those in the first set, but he's prepared to back it up if people call him a liar.
Yeah, which might be why ARI hasn't made a statement, because most of what Barney's saying is true. And actually, I was reading something Barney wrote in a later post about Peter Schwartz. And Peter Schwartz said something about Barney's half-truths. So at least Schwartz is recognizing that 50% of what Barney says is true. So, but
or maybe he didn't want to call him a liar, knowing he still had a relationship with Peikoff.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but half-truth is basically calling you a half-liar.
Yeah, that's what he thought he could get away with.
Or a half-misrepresenter, I guess.
That's a half breach of morality.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is, without ARI's side and without them trying to rebut things or, go into detail about what's true and what's false in Barney's charges, we're left with the idea that he's mostly telling the truth.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just that. I mean, does it seem like it would be the easiest thing in the world for ARI to say, oh, we let them have a display at the 2017 OCon, and here's a picture of it.
Yeah.
Or, but.
Well, that seems to me like something you could just figure out. It's like some people were there, right? We could get a witness who was there and say, yes, they had a table, or no, they didn't have any tables.
It just, it's the nature of the organization. If you follow them for they're so likely to cut anything out that could be considered a sanction of something anyone doesn't like. I find it very easy to believe that they were stonewalling, letting him do that even after rapprochement had started. Now, as a result, mediation was set up between Onkar and Craig, with Tal as the moderator. So, from Barney's telling, Onkar's being forced against his will, and in reality was maybe even using it to gather intel to bring back to other people at ARI. But during this mediation, they agreed to 3 points. The two organizations would have table displays at each other's conferences. Tal would write an announcement about the reconciliation and cooperation and publish it in Impact or New Ideal, and that Craig would write a similar announcement in TOS, and that Tal or someone from ARI would write an article for publication in TOS. It was later modified to Tal doing an interview with TOS. But Barney claims the agreement was also agreed to by the ARI board. So, again, we do see that Barney's driving this thing. He's making it happen, partially because no one wants to say no to the big donor, even if, at this point, people are angry with him for pushing something they don't want to happen. And they're probably, more openly plotting to get rid of him at this point.
Yeah, well, if there was this agreement, and it sounds like there was, then he's saying that it was agreed to by the board. And that means there's probably a written record of it. So ARI could just go to the written record of the agreement and then go point by point, say, yes, we fulfilled this, we fulfilled that. And seems like it'd be a simple matter to resolve this and just say, yes, we fulfilled the agreement and this is how we did it.
Well, as you'll see later, they said we fulfilled the agreement without providing any evidence. But
yeah, I mean, they're claiming that they fulfilled the agreement, and then Barney's claiming that they didn't. So this, to me, is the central issue. This is his main charge, is that ARI broke a contract, and to me, that's kind of more serious than some of the other ones.
Okay. Well, yeah, but, ARI told you they didn't want any questions. You're not supposed to ask them questions. So
Yeah.
now, in terms of how they fulfilled, Barney claims that Tal barely mentioned it in a long interview, while Craig really promoted it, which stands to reason since the objective standard and Craig and Barney wanted it more. But his charge is that they never gave rapprochement a good faith effort after saying they were going to. And that, obviously they were, to the extent that's true, they were just saying that to placate Barney's requests for it. He says that weeks after TOS promoted ARI's event, ARI wouldn't let Craig and TOS display at Ayn Rand Con Atlanta after asking TOS to promote the event. So at this point, ARI is showing some open defiance. I mean, it wouldn't be that much trouble to let TOS have a display table at Ayn Rand Con.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a pretty petty excuse on ARI's part not to let them display a table. And it would be nice to have them answer this charge, because it is part of the main conflict with the contract, and it would be nice to know why they didn't let them display the table.
Well, Barney claims Tal texted to say that it was an educational event and they didn't want anyone pressuring the students about objectivism. But Barney says, even though Fee had a table, he's showing an example of a double standard.
Yeah, and this is coming from Barney, so we're getting all of this secondhand from Barney. But it would be important, I think, for ARI to come out and either say Barney's right, this is how it went down, or he's wrong. We let him have it. We told him he could have a table or something like that. I don't know. They have to explain it.
Well, Barney claims the decision came from Onkar. And this was, if you remember from the schisms, this was one of ARI's examples of a charge without merit, that Onkar wasn't on the board. But Barney has some reason for making that charge. Somebody there could have told him it was Onkar, whether or not that was true. But more realistically, I mean, Onkar is part of the ruling clique with Yaron and the chief philosophy officer in an organization that regards the philosopher as a commander-in-chief carries some implicit power.
Yeah, I think that Onkar's got a lot of weight over at ARI. My question though is, why does the board have to get involved in this issue? Do they get involved in table displays at conferences? I think that it would just be enough for Onkar to say this is why we shouldn't have it, and then that's that. Someone then Yaron says I agree, and then that's it. It doesn't go to the board. I mean, technically, Yaron basically runs the board. So these little minor choices in who to have at the conference, I don't think the board would get involved in such a thing.
So yeah, and then Barney claims that ARI came back after that and asked Craig to promote Ayn Rand Con Europe, which Craig again did. Now, at this point, Judge Judy would say, why lend them more money when they haven't paid back the first loan?
Right. Yeah, there is a problem with Craig here, because he kept helping ARI when they weren't helping him, allegedly. So
yeah, he wanted to get back in.
Yeah, but at some point you got to put your foot down, right? And say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to promote your stuff if you're not going to promote me.
Well, he says that ARI didn't post an announcement about rapprochement until he personally intervened, which again makes sense when, he was driving the whole effort.
Yeah, but there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape going on at ARI, I think. So it might simply be someone dropped the ball, or they were unmotivated, and so something didn't happen. So that's why you need people like Carl Barney to kick people's ass and say, get in gear.
I think you hit on a key word with unmotivated.
Yeah. The
So
question is why were they unmotivated, right?
they didn't have the motive to do rapprochement.
But again, this is also so this one is a little tricky because they did post a mention, right, in an interview. So it's a question of what sort of announcement was agreed upon in the contract.
Well, just like, you know, you don't have to take me to a faraway restaurant so none of your friends will see you on a date with me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I mean, I would think, because I was excited. I was just getting back into the movement around 2018, and I remember reading about rapprochement and just thinking, God, I mean, just for an organization with such a history of schisms, rapprochement was just like, wow, they're really starting to get serious finally. They're getting
Wait,
over their
so you knew about it?
I had just heard about it, but I saw there was a rapprochement, but I didn't know anything about it falling apart or Barney being removed from the board until, you know, much later, until
Did you
Barney
hear
charged.
about it? Did you hear about it from Biddle or from
Um,
ARI?
God, it was one of them issuing an announcement. I'm pretty sure it was the TOS side. It was like from the Objective Standard.
Okay.
You know, they put an announcement up on their website, but again, they wanted
Yeah.
it more. But
Right.
Barney charges that ARI did not live up to the agreement for rapprochement. Yeah, they were too busy lining up support to oust you from the board. No one really, I don't think at ARI, besides the people that left when Barney and Biddle did, probably ever wanted it. But why they agreed to it is a fair question then. He
Well, I
says
think it's fair. I think it's fair to say that at some they wanted some sort of cooperation in the beginning, and then it fell apart. So it sounds like there was a falling out at some point. So
well,
like at least like some people at ARI wanted it.
yeah,
And
I'm open to that. But Barney says that he wrote to Tal saying that the agreement hadn't been kept, but Tal just kept asserting that it had been. And so this is, you know, again, he's just asserting that it has been taken care of. He's not offering any evidence. And this is, so did they live up to their agreement for rapprochement? And because, you know, there's one thing about the letter of the agreement, and again, this goes back to the spirit of the agreement. Did they ever want rapprochement?
I don't know how to answer that. I think they would have to tell us whether they wanted it or not. It seems like they didn't, or it seems like some did and some didn't, and the ones who didn't won out. So I don't know if, I think to some extent, we can evaluate whether the agreement was kept based on what Barney is saying. But since we don't have it in writing, we don't have the meeting minutes where this agreement took place. It's going to be hard to determine whether to the letter it was fulfilled, unless ARI presents their detailed case.
Well, let me offer a bit of circumstantial evidence. This is a clip of your own from 2020, right after Barney's essays came out. And I think your own inadvertently gives some credence to the charge that they never gave the 2017 rapprochement a real chance by saying he still wouldn't give it a chance unless Craig apologizes to Peikoff for the McCaskey situation from 2010.
So the question is, some of Craig Biddle's posts suggested a new rapprochement as the way forward. Is that even a remote possibility with all the recent strife? The simple answer is no. There's not going to be a rapprochement unless, and Craig knows what it would take, what a rapprochement would take. Rapprochement would take an apology for what he said about Leonard Peikoff 10 years ago, and an apology for what he has done in the last year or so. And I'm not going to give you details about either one of those.
So if that issue from 10 years ago still hasn't been resolved, was it resolved when they agreed to rapprochement in 2017?
Maybe that was this issue that stuck. Maybe Onkar brought that up. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but possibly Onkar or somebody else brought up this idea that Craig had to apologize, and then Yaron agreed with it. And maybe that's why it didn't happen. And this is the area where I kind of sympathize with ARI, because I do think that there were issues with how Craig responded to Peikoff. Even though I agree the email was the main problem and started everything, I think Craig's response had problems. And then I think Craig's response to Onkar's statement in the OAC class, that also had problems. But I don't really want to get into that right now. But I do sympathize with that aspect of it, because I think to some extent Craig assumes too much.
Right, but shouldn't those issues have been resolved before they agreed to start publishing and promoting each other's conferences? And then they claim ARI didn't do it, and then gee, well, your own saying they never really resolved issues from 2010 anyway. So yeah, you think that might have had some influence on Barney's charges about they weren't really living up to the spirit?
Sure. I mean, I don't know what the timeline was like. Maybe they didn't realize that they needed an apology until later. I don't know how things went down, because we don't have ARI's side of it. So
not only that, but Yaron's asking for an apology on behalf of Peikoff. And again, according to Barney, Peikoff isn't seeking such an apology from Biddle himself.
right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they want to know, that's a good point. They want an apology to Peikoff from Craig, but Peikoff has no problem with people working with Craig. So what's the problem?
Yeah, I think other people didn't want to work with Craig for their own reasons. So this is where after, Tal is just asserting to Barney that, yes, we have lived up to the agreements. And Barney himself, he describes it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's just like, I can see you haven't lived up to the agreements based on what we've talked about. But he says that Tal asserting the agreement had been kept while pointing out that it hadn't been was Barney's final straw, and that as a result, he told them that he would not fund the Ayn Rand University. Now, I'm sure they had to be expecting that when they ousted him anyway. And they did finally unveil Ayn Rand University at the 2021 OCON to much fanfare, which could also be its own episode. And even a few weeks ago, they brought Don Watkins back. And then, you had donors like Bud Brigham and others who seemed to pick up Barney's slack, and they've widened their donor base since then. But
well, if they're going to create an actual university, then I think it would be fair to call it Ayn Rand University. But I don't see anything too much more than what they had before, which was a center, the Objectivist Academic Center. So I don't know what they're doing with this Ayn Rand University. It doesn't seem very impressive.
Yeah, I think that's a fair charge. And again, that could be another show. So, Barney claims that he's been shunned by some at the Ayn Rand Institute for pointing out that they didn't live up to their agreement, which that is somewhat confirmed by their schisms essay. He says there's
well, some of these things aren't really a charge, right? It's just reality. It's just a fact. It's what happened. So this is one of my issues with Barney's statement is that he focuses on minor issues like getting shunned from OCON or something like that. Well, that's just an effect. That's just a natural consequence of the schism. So if he really wants to fix the schism, focus on things that cause the schism, and just delete or edit away all the other stuff, because it's just now a big mishmash of convoluted points. I think the problem with Barney's statement is it's not focused enough on the main issue.
Well, that's more of a stylistic issue where it may not be as effective than, I mean, that is the kind of reaction you'd expect from a guy that felt like he was betrayed to the tune of $40 million as well.
Yeah, I don't know how accidental it is in his style. Like he just sort of sprays bullets all over the place, or if he's actually doing that on purpose. Like, this is what he's trying to create, is this mishmash.
That's why I think, he was one of them at the beginning. I mean, he was all into the non-disclosures and, terse letters and things behind the scenes. And I think that he changed that, a lot of these people had probably just been saying yes to him because he'd been paying them. And they didn't really want to go through with it, at least on some level on their own. And so just kind of getting blown off by ARI and these people that had, seemed to be loyal to him, I think just, it set something off that made him ready to just unload and just, spill what happened.
Well, that could be it. Yeah, I mean, he certainly gave him a lot of money, and if you give that much money, you should expect something, But another point I had was that he was donating this money to a charity. So it's not really like a business transaction. So he's kind of treating it like a business transaction where he's expecting to get value for value. And that's kind of how ARI presents themselves.
That's
They
right.
say,
The nature of objectivism.
right. Even though they're a charity, they say, we want to give you value for value. You give money to us and we'll change the culture, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. We'll give free books to teachers on your behalf. So I think Barney, on one hand, he should realize he's giving the money away to a charity, but on the other hand, it is ARI and he's fair. It's okay, I think, for him to expect some return on his investment.
Sure. Now, he says that there's much more he could release, ending this first essay, but that he wants these facts to be known as necessary to justly evaluate Craig. And again, that's a shot across the bow that he can back up his claims. He ends by saying he wants injustice to end for Craig, which makes sense as his successor at Prometheus, to be considered moral by ARI and their friends.
Yeah, he's kind of a justice seeker. And that's the way he's presenting his case.
Yeah,
so I guess the charges he's delivering here are the purpose for delivering these charges is to ultimately get some sort of justice for Craig. So I'm trying to get at his motive here to speculate. So he's saying that he wants justice for Craig, but in doing so, he's basically dishing the dirt on ARI. So it seems like but now I recall he did begin the blog entry with a whole list of Craig's accomplishments and everything. So he's presenting Craig as this hero of objectivism. And then he goes into these charges where people are unjustly condemning Craig. And so he's juxtaposing those two things.
Yeah. And I mean, to some extent, Craig is almost a proxy for Barney himself. He's saying, I've been, not only it's the whole Biddle Barney faction that has been treated unjustly.
Yeah.
So, but then after this, in response to this first essay, the Ayn Rand Institute came out with their own terse comment.
Yeah. So when Barney wrote his first article, ARI responded, and the board of directors issued a statement, and it was in the New Ideal. And I just wanted to note that originally in that original statement, they did not refer to any sort of private matter or talk about like a third party being involved. And they didn't give those as excuses for not rebutting Carl Barney's charges. What they said in that original statement was, quote, "It would be a fruitless expenditure of resources if we spent the time that would be necessary to rebut publicly and objectively all the allegations made in that post." So they were implying that they could rebut the allegations if only they considered doing so worth the expenditure of resources. And that is a lot different from their attitude now, which they expressed in the recent Schisms article. In that article, they wrote, "We do not pretend that outside the proceedings of a legal trial, third parties can access the facts necessary to objectively evaluate allegations of private misconduct." So note that ARI mischaracterizes the original board statement in their recent paraphrasing of it. So in the recent Schisms article, they paraphrased that original board statement and they said, quote, "The board's short public statement said, A, we reject the allegations in Barney's post, but that it would be fruitless to try to litigate a private matter in public." Now, the word litigate is in quotes in the Schisms article, but it never appeared in the original board statement. It wasn't about litigating, nor is the framing of the matter as private in the original board statement. So in the Schisms article, they've completely changed the context of words like fruitless, and they've changed actual and words like litigate, they've added to the paraphrasing. So I think this is an indication that there's some rewriting of history going on. Like they weren't satisfied with the board statement and they saw some mistakes in it. And so now they're trying to correct that.
That's a good catch. And I mean, my first pass is that they're probably just, even up to the time that Barney did that first statement, they were trying to thread the needle between having him off the board, but maybe still having him be a donor. And so they weren't ready to fully even break with him as a former board member himself, that maybe they didn't get into all that. And they're just saying, we chose not to do it instead of, it's a moral decision, it's not right to do so unless there's litigation.
I just think they didn't come up with an excuse, a good excuse. I think they didn't have it down in the original statement. It didn't even occur to them to think of it as like this private versus public matter, but they could have. But regarding Barney, I disagree. I don't think they probably wrote him off. He had already stopped giving them money, and so that's probably why they kicked him off the board, really. So I don't think they had any intention of trying to retain him as a donor. They knew he was going to be gone. So I don't think that really affected the way they wrote that original statement. I just think the original statement, didn't satisfy the later allegations. So they wrote the original statement, and then Barney came out with his charges and his articles, and they had to come up with some sort of rationale to explain everything now in a different way.
That's possible. Well, I do want to move on because the next Barney responds to this ARI piece. And one of the things they'd said was that his comments were riddled with errors and distortions. And he's calling out those vague denials. He's right away, he's like, what, if there are errors and distortions, why don't you, say what some of those are? You know, he even says he's welcome to making corrections. I mean, the person trying to get more engagement often at least believes they're in the right.
Yeah, I mean, at least from this statement, you get the sense that Barney is after the truth. He seems to be wanting to figure it out, solve the problem, have a discussion, argue, debate. These are all aspects of reason and logic, and coming up with objective reality and objective truth. So he seems to be more on the side of let's find out the truth.
Put it all
And
out there.
yeah, and he's definitely putting it all out. Well,
And
I
that
don't know if he's
wasn't
putting
his
it all out
attitude
there.
when he was, on the board necessarily.
Right. And so it is interesting that he was behind the scenes trying to change things at ARI. And then he has like a high tolerance, I guess, because I wouldn't have tolerated a lot of things that he apparently did.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a kind of back and forth where he's giving them money. I mean, he certainly is. They're more open to his suggestions than they are, any of us plebes.
Yeah, he obviously has a lot more money than most of us. So maybe he has just throwaway money. But if I had if I had millions of dollars, I would have gotten that money honestly in some way, and I would have cared about it. So I wouldn't have just thrown it away, even if I had millions of dollars.
Well, part of his attitude is because he doesn't want to feel like he threw it away. Well, the board it's because the board comes out and basically implies that Barney did something wrong with their comment that he was voted off unanimously. And, Barney now uses that implication is the reason for him now saying more.
ARI does what they accuse Barney of doing, is they are making an arbitrary accusation without evidence. So, but this doesn't mean that Barney is correct, of course. It just means that there's this arbitrary accusation from ARI.
Well, in terms of their statement, they just said he was removed from the board. I guess the fact that it was riddled with errors and distortions is the accusation.
Right. So yeah, so that's what I'm referring to. So they're saying that his statement's full of errors, but they don't give a list of these errors. And I always like to say, if you're pointing to a document and saying, just look at it, it's full of errors, and you're expecting people to see the errors, well, why can't you just tell them the errors? It's how hard is it to point out what the errors are? I think ARI assumes that the readers are going to know what they know,
or they just expect to be able to make such general statements and not have anyone question them about it.
Yeah, or they're just or they're just they feel like they need to make some response and say, look, we're in the right, he's lying or telling misstatements, and so, but they don't, I guess they're not properly motivated to be able to explain it or write it all out in an article.
Yeah, well, so in this latest piece, Barney says that Yaron and ARI broke 2 agreements with him. He's kind of sharpening his charges as he goes along. One was rapprochement, and also in exchange for continued contributions, this is what you brought up, the implementation of a conflict resolution process for dealing objectively with disputes and differences. And he says he was cheated by them not fulfilling their agreements.
Yeah, I hope a lot of that was in writing, because if he does go to court, that would come in handy, I think, is they broke an agreement. I mean, that's, a breach of contract. So, but again, like I said before, he is treating his donations as kind of a trade, like a business transaction. So that might not fly in court, but I think ARI should consider themselves bound to produce some objective value for their donors. And if they did tell Barney they would do something with his money, then they should have done it.
Yeah, just following through. It's just basic integrity, if nothing else. Or they should have had the guts to tell him, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But now for about this conflict resolution, Yaron was asked about this charge on his show, and he says that he considered it cultish, but still claims that he gave it a chance.
Objectivism question. Barney claims you didn't honor an agreement to create a conflict resolution system. Is that something that should be implemented with an objectivism? No, I don't think it should be implemented with an objectivism. I don't see the purpose of it. It's cultish, and I've always been against it. But at the same time, I try to accommodate. I try to do something. The idea that I didn't honor an agreement is blatantly false.
So yeah, so note that Yaron is associating a conflict resolution process with a cult. I think that's a little weird. I don't think it's just cults that have these processes. I think these are something that many businesses have implemented, and organizations have implemented just to solve human resource issues, or
especially an organization that thinks that schisms are so normal and natural.
Yeah, maybe, well, maybe they want the schisms, but I don't see why you would necessarily want a schism unless it was over a core issue, core philosophical issue, which I don't think this is. At least they haven't explained how it might be. In Biddle's case, it might be a little different. They might be able to make a case for that, but with Barney, it just seems like they agreed to a rapprochement deal and they didn't fulfill it. So there's not much of a fundamental philosophical issue there.
Well, Yaron inadvertently, I think, confirms a pattern that Barney charges on rapprochement. Namely, that Yaron will accommodate or go along with suggestions, be it, healing with Biddle or a conflict resolution process, but he doesn't really believe in it. So it ends up being a half-hearted at best request. I mean, were you really living up to the agreement if you never really believed in it to begin with?
Yeah. Well, so Yaron has to deal, with a lot of different people and donors and employees. And so he's got one point in his favor is that he has to balance all of these concerns and pressures on his time and his thinking. So he's got a lot on his plate. Every manager of an organization does, but that's his job, right? So if he has to seek some help in doing so, then that's what he has to do.
I mean, a conflict resolution process would take some time away from you unless, for example, you want all final decisions to be yours and not have to listen to a conflict resolution process.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what level the conflict is. If it's a conflict between big donors and your chief philosophy officer, or what's this, big donors and Yaron, then that's a major conflict, and maybe the board has to step in to resolve that, which is what happened. So
yeah, I mean, Barney claims in response that he told them he was cutting off funding until Yaron lived up to his agreements. And he says after that, Yaron got angry that Barney didn't trust him. And that was the impetus for demanding that Barney be removed from the board. So this is where the big split happens. He claims that Yaron gave the board an ultimatum, him or me.
Yeah, so this is kind of the way it went down with McCaskey. There's an ultimatum given.
You're right.
Except in this case, Barney didn't resign. I guess he invited the board to kick him off.
Right. So they had a special board meeting where apparently Yaron was attacking him, like they were excommunicating someone from the collective. And Barney claims at the end he invited the board to vote him off. I mean, I can believe that just because he saw the handwriting on the wall and wanted to make people feel less pressured or something. But and McCaskey was the same way. Even if he cut a deal, maybe it's love of Rand. I mean, they don't want to be seen as hurting her legacy, even on the way out the door. I mean, even the Brandons still loved her.
Right. But at some point, people have to start thinking about their own legacy, their own values, their own integrity. So I don't really understand, this whole resigning or inviting people to kick you off the board. If you think this is a major problem at the organization and you're fighting to get something fixed, why do you suddenly stop fighting because people disagree with you and want to kick you off? I mean, you still fight. That's I don't really understand it.
He knew there was going to be a majority, and then he didn't want anyone voting for him to be the next to have to walk the plank. I mean, it was probably said
that's. But how is anything going to change if you don't get other people to vote for you? The whole point of fighting is to get others to agree with you and to join your side. So it's like when you get to the board level, the conflict is going to be resolved one way or the other. That's your last opportunity to win them to your side.
Right. I mean, it was a power play and Barney lost. He thought he couldn't really be kicked off the board because of being such a big donor.
Well, I don't think that. He invited them to kick him off.
Well, at the point that they're having a special meeting about kicking him off.
Maybe he wanted to get kicked off.
Well, I think
maybe that was his plan.
I think even after he got kicked off, he thought he would still have some influence there. And that's why he still didn't say anything for 18 months.
Maybe he had this whole idea with Biddle planned out. Like he was going to get kicked at ARI. It'd be a big thing. It'd raise his people would be aware of him more and raise awareness of him. And then he brings Biddle on board and starts funding him, and starts another organization.
Yeah, I don't think it went down like that. I think he truly feels like he put 40 million in with it and now he still wants to have influence.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but
so that's why
he had to know the writing was on the wall at some point.
Yeah, he did. But I mean, he thought he was gonna, I mean, I don't think he wanted to get kicked off the board. He thought he was going to be able to kind of push everyone over to rapprochement and see that Craig wasn't a bad guy and that, if everyone gave it a fair chance, everything would be okay.
Maybe. So, I don't know.
This is speculation, but now he also, Barney implies that some on the board didn't raise their hands, but it was recorded as unanimous. And, in fact, they recorded it as 11-0 in the essay in the response. But I mean, the bottom line is no one had the guts to say nay because, they were going to be the next to be kicked off. He ends by saying that the board capitulated to Yaron, which, I mean, is ultimately Barney lost the power play.
Well, I don't understand this actually. So he invited the board to vote him off, but then he says they capitulated to Yaron. Is that a contradiction?
Well, I think he's saying that they capitulated to him in the plan to vote him off. And, because this is a board that, he had good relationships. I don't think it's a particularly adversarial board for Yaron. And I don't know if that's the most healthy thing for an organization. But these people, he saw it as Barney saw it as he was a member of the board. And then as soon as he said he was going to stop funding, they said, oh, well, you don't trust me and we're kicking you off the board. And then he starts this process and maybe Barney's even talking to these people and trying to get the votes himself, but he realizes he doesn't have it. And so as far as he's concerned, the board's capitulated to your own. And he said, hey, just don't even vote for me.
Okay, so maybe it happened at 2 separate times.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
So then in this, this is the last piece we're going to cover in this show, but it's titled More Context About Craig Biddle and the Ayn Rand Institute. Now in this one, Barney claims that Ankar and Yaron have been publicly and covertly blacklisting and denouncing Craig and TOS, which I think is consistent with other accounts we've heard. I mean, they start talking about, they start talking bad about those on the plank, be it Kelly, Trzynski.
Yeah, so this must be some sort of like whisper campaign or something he's alleging.
Yeah.
So I think these would be, I would classify them as like the effects of the schism. So if you have a disagreement with someone and you kick them out of your organization, and then they start saying things about you and you start saying things about them, it seems just like normal things that go on, people talking about each other. And if you have negative things to say about someone, then you do so to your friends and you don't necessarily write a big article about it. So I'm not sure how interesting this whole aspect of it is. I don't think it addresses the root cause of the schism. I don't think it's going to solve anything.
That's fair, but I think he inadvertently gives us a little bit of inside process, because I think that the whisper campaigns happen almost concurrently as they're planning to officially remove you.
Maybe. I guess there was some lead up to the schism. Barney mentions how Ankar was saying things about Craig's editing and didn't like Craig's editing, and that sort of thing.
And that built up over time. But yeah, and going back to Ankar, Barney charges at the 2016 Ocon that both Yaron and Ankar denounced Craig from the stage and claimed that they tried to work with him to show him the errors of his thinking. And Barney says that never happened. I mean, presumably via Craig. But, that's actually kind of like how they tried to show Kelly the error of his ways. They said, well, he was on the way out.
Right. So it's interesting that there is this denial that it actually happened. And why is Barney the one saying it? Did Craig deny that these conversations took place? I don't even know.
I mean, look, I like Craig generally. I think he's good. I think that he likes to focus so much on flourishing that he doesn't like to get his hands dirty with some of the political stuff.
He wrote an article. He's written a few articles on the schism. So I'm curious why he doesn't address some of these finer points and gossip.
He's trying to keep it just very, highbrow and just not getting into, I suspect that it's the money that makes it more personal for Barney.
Well, with Kelly and Peikoff, Kelly says they did talk to him, right? So they weren't lying then. They had some conversations with Kelly.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, why shouldn't Craig just come out and confirm or deny this? So yeah, they had been talking to me.
I think Barney is trying to, even by doing this himself, help Biddle stay above it all. Like he's just focusing on intellectual issues. It's a fair question. I'm not sure, but he goes on to say that behind the scenes they're prohibiting employees and discouraging others to write for TOS. And again, that's a believable pattern. Like, don't read the Brandons or whoever the latest schism person is. You're not supposed to read. He claims that people went to Leonard to complain about Barney and Craig, calling Craig libertarian, which I have no doubt that happened. I mean, libertarian is basically objectivist for heretic.
Yeah. Well,
And Barney says he pled his side to Peikoff too, and that's what reminded me of this story I'd heard from 30 years ago about the Riesmans, versus Binswanger.
yeah, well, it's not clear to me who's complaining to Leonard.
Everyone,
So,
I have little doubt.
like, how many people have Leonard's ear, and how much complaining does he listen to about Barney and Craig?
Yeah, that's
There's,
fair. And at some point he may say, I don't want to be bothered with any of it.
seems like the type of people Leonard would be talking to know that Craig is not a libertarian. So that this actually doesn't sound credible to me. It sounds made up. It's like, who's saying that Craig is a libertarian?
You're saying that no one at ARI, that if they didn't like Craig, they would use that charge to try to demean someone?
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the people at ARI who have Leonard's ear, I don't think that they would be calling Craig a libertarian. They would know that he's not a libertarian. That would be ridiculous. Leonard would know that he's not a libertarian.
They're just saying, they're trying to diminish the other faction. And that's just, and it may have been in passing. It's not that huge of a charge. But now this is a little more significant. He claims that they told Leonard that he was telling people in Europe not to let Yaron speak, even for free. And this seems related to Barney's later charges that, Yaron was just focused on traveling all the time, even more than spreading the ideas per se. He said that
he does like to travel. I mean, that's clear. So, but you kind of want to have someone who likes to travel to spread the word, So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
I'm interested in someone willing to travel outside of their comfort zone to promote the ideas as well.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Barney goes on to say that their charges are harmful to Craig and TOS and hurt the reputation of ARI and objectivism. So he's saying that, yes, even ARI, their charges against Craig and TOS are actually hurting the reputation of ARI. That's not as much a legal threat. He's saying you're hurting yourselves, but that's more his perspective.
Their charges are harmful to Craig.
And they also hurt the reputation of ARI and objectivism. Now, that first part could be a legal charge, but he's saying you're hurting your own firm.
Yeah. They're only hurting themselves if the charges are untrue.
Which he believes.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's all these one-sided affairs. We don't have ARI's take on it, so it's hard to say.
Right. Well, he claims that ARI attempted to use defamation of Craig to dissuade Leonard from letting Barney market Peikoff's courses. And again, I have little doubt they tried to use Biddle against Barney when they were trying to get rid of him. I mean, the right to market Peikoff's courses, it sounds like it itself became a bit of a power play for Leonard Peikoff's approval, because, they're all fighting for the rights to Peikoff's lectures.
Yeah, and I question Barney's motive here, because he initially announced that he had the right to deliver Peikoff's courses. And then later he blamed ARI for not being able to get the master tapes, or the original recordings, so that he could deliver the courses. And so it seemed like he initially was just trying to control ARI in some way and make them do something for him. And he was less interested in actually delivering Peikoff's courses, because he could have just taken some other recording. He didn't have to get the master recording, right?
I mean, the master's better. I think I mean, I can't say that yours is not plausible, but I think it's as much that Barney just wanted desperately to stay in Peikoff's orbit, especially after the break from ARI. And so he's just looking for anything. It's like, let me market your books and tapes or whatever else.
Yeah, well, I would like to hear more from him on that, because I'm curious what if he was so gung-ho on delivering the courses, why did not getting the master tapes stop him? Because most of Peikoff's courses are online. He could just have Craig Biddle do a lecture or something and then run the course from YouTube.
Well, this is for the next show we do on it, but one of Barney's charges is that they shouldn't be giving Peikoff's lectures away for free.
Yeah. Well, if he wants to just sell a product, then that's different, I guess. But he's saying he was saying he wants to deliver the courses in some way. So you can do that. I mean, just flip on YouTube and you deliver the course. So I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. But so Barney, for his part, he says that this not letting him access to the Peikoff tapes was his final straw. And that's why he decided that this 10-year campaign against Craig had to be exposed. Basically, when they tried to turn Peikoff against him, he decided he had nothing left to lose by going public. And so that's what he's saying led to all of this.
So the final straw. So it seems like the final straw is fairly minor in comparison to all the other straws. Usually the final straw is some like major thing, right? It's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Right.
And so ARI not doing something for Barney is just another example of them not doing something for him. They've been not doing things for him for a long time. And this thing that they didn't do for him was after they split already. So
right. It's
like,
another escalation. And he's saying that this is the reason he came public. He's giving his reason why that was the thing. And I mean, to your point, I mean, the straw that broke the camel's back, each straw by itself is insignificant, but it's the totality of them. And even though that last one may still be a piece of straw, it still was enough.
What I'm trying to get at, I guess, is that this wasn't really a slight against Craig. It was a slight against Barney. So if he saw this campaign against Craig all these years, why is this the straw that broke the camel's back and not some other slight against Craig?
He's putting it more mistreatment by ARI generally that started with Craig, and then, but you're right, it's a loose tie-in, and I mean, the specific reason for whether it was this or what have you that made him go public, I mean, something got him irritated enough to go public and risk further ire, because they were at least still letting him attend like OCON nominally before he came out with this information.
Right. Well, as long as he was silent.
Right. But he says that ARI initiated the dispute. He says they made it public by making public statements about rapprochement and then reneging on them. But he was also just saying that they hadn't said nearly enough to support rapprochement publicly.
Right. Yeah, that's a bit of a...
And then he's using the small public statements they did use against them.
It's a bit of a conundrum. Like what? Yeah, so they buried a public statement in some interview, but now it's now
that's the basis.
That's the basis
of them making it public. No, that's just the type of thing I noticed. But he says he tried to fix it privately for years, that he wrote to the board begging them to honor rapprochement, which again is more evidence that he'd been the driving force behind it. Here he claims Onkar doubled down with a nasty email to the board condemning Craig again. That's the one I want to get a copy of.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Onkar could write a long article on Craig.
I'm sure. Barney claims he asked the board to respond about Biddle, but they didn't respond. I mean, they were already kind of going Team Yaron at that point, or maybe it was even after he was gone, and they decided rather than respond, we need to put out a long essay about why it's not right to respond, or why it's right not to respond.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of the people on the board probably don't put such things in emails. They would do it privately, one-on-one, or in phone conversations or something like that, I bet.
Sure, but we could at least see his letter to them. He goes on to say in the letter to the board, he claims that Yaron raised a complaint about Craig DeLeonard, and that Tal objected to Peikoff's courses being delivered via Craig's Objective Standard Institute, and also that Mayhew and Gatte had hostile opposition to Craig and to Barney for his support of Craig. So at one point later, as their rationale to go after Biddle, they say that he sanctioned Barney's charges. But in this case, they're going after Barney for his support of Biddle. So this goes to my point that sometimes they change the reasons. They're like, I'm against person A for being with person B, and I'm against person B for being with person A.
Right. Yeah. Well, it seems like there's an association problem there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty common, actually. If you associate with someone's enemy, you're taking a risk of losing that friend,
Yeah, but it's just like your problem is you talk to Carl Barney, when they're saying to Biddle, and then they're saying to Biddle, or they're saying to Barney, well, your problem is you talk to Craig Biddle. So it's just a little bit circular. But he finishes off the piece by claiming, my purpose in bringing this into the open and calling for civil, rational discussion and engagement among objectivists is to encourage the objectivist movement to cooperate and collaborate, and to positively and productively advance and model these vital ideas in the culture. Now, I can believe that's true, even if I suspect he's also motivated by anger of getting shunned after dumping a ton of cash into an organization he helped begin.
Yeah, and there might be some resentment there, but I don't see any reason really to question his motive here. I think he does want some collaboration. He's seems genuine in that point. He has put forward the idea of the conflict resolution process, which I don't know. I think it sounds decent, like a decent idea, at least to consider and mull around, and in maybe brainstorm a bit. And there might be a way to implement that. I would like to see both sides come together and debate their disagreements, like in public. That would be awesome if
And
we could get
it's charges of immorality. Any debate would be a sanction.
Well, they need to get over this sanction issue.
I agree.
I don't think ARI still holds to that. I think in practice, they don't believe there's a sanction of the sanctioners or whatever it is. I don't even know what it is anymore. It's you're not morally sanctioning your enemy if you go and debate them. You're trying to show that your argument is better than their argument in a public setting, and you're going to have an audience, and so you're trying to convince people. And wherever you can do that, as long as there's no clear objective sanction you're giving to them, like you're saying, I I love this group when they're really your enemy or something. Like if you're overtly saying you like this group and you don't, then that's a lie and it's a false sanction. But if you're there to debate them, criticize them, tell them they're wrong about everything, or you go so far as to call them dishonest or something like that, well, that's not sanction. Even if you do it in their home, you go into their home and you call them all these names and you chew them out and you argue with them, that's not, you're not sanctioning them. So I think objectivists need to get over this issue of sanction. If we need to debate it, let's have a long debate about sanction and just solve it, because it's really getting in the way of cooperation.
Well, that's a good final thought for this episode. And then I do want to again emphasize that next we are going to be concentrating on the next part 2 of this is going to be that ARI is failing and needs our help. Barney's fourth charge against them, fourth essay against them. And that's where it gets not into so much these personal issues, but the state of the movement itself, if you believe there is an organized movement.
I certainly do. It may be organized in 2 different camps or maybe 3, but there is an organized movement. And there's also just random objectivists trying to spread the ideas around. And so there is just an intellectual movement in general as well. But there's clearly some sort of organized movement, at least at the ARI level and at the Atlas Society level and elsewhere. So
something to build from.
Yeah, and hopefully if we could get all these pieces together, we'll build a Voltron of objectivism and we'll conquer the world.
I like your spirit. Well, good. Well, this has been, I'm glad we went over this. We'll have more to say in the future. Feel free to comment in the comment section. Any final thoughts, William?
No, this was a struggle for me because I don't normally like to talk about these gossipy sorts of issues, but I think it is important to get into the actual claims that Barney makes. And I hope that we've shed some light on how to approach this issue and maybe think about it in a clearer way.
Good thoughts. Thank you. Great. Well, again, this is the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.